Welcome to a new episode of my HR Talk. Today we are at the Café Mother Eye in the heart of Düsseldorf. This cafe has been named after Johanna Eye, who has been a great sponsor of art and culture here in Düsseldorf. I think there is no better place for our discussion today on corporate culture. Corporate culture for me is more than just a term. It is the basis for our organization. Corporate culture defines how we collaborate, how we make decisions, and work together. I'm really happy to have today a guest with me who is a specialist on corporate culture. Gabriele Fanta, CHRO of Körber AG. I'm very happy that you are my guest today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm also happy to be back in Düsseldorf since I was also living here more than 1.5 decades ago. So the city is very close to my heart still.
Perfect. So our listeners already know something about you and your experience with Düsseldorf. So before we start our discussion on why corporate culture matters, how do we establish corporate culture and how we measure it, I would briefly ask you to introduce yourself before we then start.
Absolutely, and thanks for asking me. Well, basically my professional life was pretty much driven by adventures. I've been studying business administration in the early days, started in a marketing function, moved on to corporate comms, then into market relation roles. Then I went to the US for 2 years. After that I came back and changed basically first time the industry. Started in automotive and then went to energy. That's why I'm familiar with Düsseldorf. Okay. And after 6 years in utility, I changed again the industry and the profession. Since I had one of my majors, HR, I was moving then, after I was already 30 years old, into the HR function with McDonald's and then to Sixt. And then since more than 4 years, I'm working at Körber and I'm super glad about this opportunity.
Thank you for the introduction. What role do you think we play as an HR function in establishing, promoting corporate culture?
I'm very happy that in our days HR is called an enabling function. You know, in former days we have been called overheads. So I think that's what exactly we are when it comes to culture, transformation and change. We have to enable both leaders and the people to still be, inspired and performing, maybe over a decade, maybe over even their lifetime employment. And that's our role. And for culture, I think the culture core, which we have to set together with the leadership team, but also with our people, and maybe if you have co-determination bodies, also with these peoples, we have to have a core where we can build from.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I always think about our function as an architecture of corporate culture. Because for me, culture, as I said, is also about a framework, a certain framework in which people live and behave and collaborate. So I think it's about us or on us to create this framework and also make sure that our values and beliefs are all anchored in our processes and structures. So not just putting it on paper, the course and beliefs, but also anchoring it in recruiting, in training, in development, in the onboarding process, and all these processes where people can actually then feel what it means and that it's not just written somewhere, but also anchored and deeply implemented in everyday life. And that's on us, but I think we also agree that it's that HR should play a major role in driving it, but can't do it by themselves. So it's, as you were saying, a promoter and enabler, but it needs more than us to really make it alive. It needs everybody, it needs leaders, it needs also our co-determination bodies and in fact everyone.
Everyone, absolutely. And I also agree with you that the framework has to be there so that we can measure ourselves against it, but that also people know where's their orientation point, where's their North Star when it comes to behavioral topics, when it comes to be a culture ambassador, right? And that's why I have to tell all people which do not work in HR, it's a hard work to translate culture cores, leadership principles into tangible actions like diagnostic frameworks, exactly, like trainings, like implementing it with every bit and piece of our coming together. Because if I take culture, it's a glue, but also the way on how we come together, not only at the workplace, but also in every interaction. Culture to me goes broader goes to our customers, goes to our ecosystem partners. It's really a broad approach. And it's why we have to also bring our shoe in every bit and piece of all those frameworks.
Yeah, it's an important point, I would say, because I mean, there's always a lot of discussions going on how to actually implement and create a corporate culture, or maybe change a corporate culture. And the question always is, do we have like a big program, a large program focusing on culture, or are there other ways, or should there be other ways? What's your experience and your personal view on, is it like this big bang program and then changing the culture, or what is it?
I'm hesitating to big bang programs since I have been crossing so many industries and functions, and we have been choosing actually another approach. And maybe that's something I can disclose here. I really had to back and really work on that culture project for more than a year internally, because we said we do a bottom-up exercise, visiting plenty of sites and asking our people, hey, what's important to you? We started with a co-determination in Germany so that they're also on it. And then we made a tour across the world. And then we extracted that culture core of trust and collaboration, more than 40 brands, very different businesses, more than 100 sites worldwide. So you really have to do also bottom-up approach. And we have been doing this internally with a little culture team for people. And then we have been pulling together all those strings we've been finding across the globe.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I find that very convincing. I'm also not a big fan of large programs. I think the advantage of such programs is the attention that the topic gets, and also the top down, and that the top management wants it and owns it. But it comes certainly with a lot of disadvantages, because for the people, it might sound superficial and just putting something on paper, and just like a tick the box exercise. So the ownership, I think, is at a risk. And also with such large programs, from my experience, you run the risk that it's there for a certain amount of time, and once the program is over, it lacks, or it loses the momentum, and makes it less sustainable and long lasting than if you make it from bottom up, but also with certain initiatives that are rather focused on certain areas where culture is implemented, such as a leadership framework, such as, for example, implementing in recruiting processes and onboarding and so on. So with different initiatives focusing on culture without making it such a large project. I think that's, for me, it was also a better way and a more sustainable way.
Yeah, and I think that's what we try to do. We have been pulling together those people not only out of HR, but also from other functions. And we now also educate culture coaches from each and every function you can think of, right? Because they bring then their, let's say, project back. They can then execute it on site with local circumstances. Take Malaysia. I mean, it's very weird if you send a German person over to educate those people on culture. You have to do it the other way around to convince them that culture is also important to them, make it a business case, right? And then take all values they have, combine it so that they can really bring it to life when they go back.
Yeah. There's another point I'm interested in how you see it. Because, I mean, with changing the culture, it's always running the risks that there's a discrepancy between how you vision the culture and want the culture to be and how people actually feel it. I mean, I think that's normal and part of every process. From your experience, what needs to be done to kind of eliminate the discrepancy from how it should be and how it really is? Is there any
secret sauce maybe? Yeah, I'd say it's like, you know, the book Radical Candor. You have to allow every kind of feedback. We have a social intranet, and we also have there an episode of Culture Podcast, an internal one. Nice. And our recipe is people which are maybe more reflecting on the downsides of it, and, you know, also sometimes blaming us for a bit blue washing because the color is blue in our company. We invite them then to become guests. So we also discuss this then pretty openly in that podcast format so that people say, hey, we take it serious. Yes, you can criticize. Yes, you can also bring your points to the table, and let's be open about it.
That's really a good point, because you make them part of the game. You listen actively and not kind of push it away and all sort of criticism, which might be even right, and gives you also the opportunity to then react to it and give it a brighter scene. So that's I think that's really a good point.
Yeah, I think also communication, you know, you can never over communicate. You can never over communicate, and the steered communication we do as companies, from corporate comms, internal comms to the people, is more one-way street.
Yeah.
And I think the recipe to bring a culture project to life is to really open this to a two-way street and go from highways, you know, to little village roads even, so that people can bring really the topics which are touching them each and every day. They should bring their Sunday or Monday thinkings, or maybe even their Friday thinkings, to us, so that we can collaborate with them and improve our corporate culture.
And I think the key here is the different format for open dialogue. You were mentioning the podcast, also inviting people that might be the more critical about the culture, but of course also supporters. But then have smaller groups, smaller platforms for open dialogue that where people feel secure also. And we have had also very good experience with those different formats. Our CEO having a broader CEO talk where he live reacts to the questions of the people, like thousands of people having the opportunity to directly communicate with them, which was really well accepted. But then my colleagues and myself going through the different sites for open dialogue, which is completely different. And I think that makes a difference eventually, so that everybody can actually pick and feel what's interested or the best format for them.
Yeah, and actually it makes totally sense to do so. We also have the kind of similar format. We have a CEO talk, and we also convinced our CEO to take part in the culture rollouts, which we do worldwide. So very often, if he's available, he's then joining the company we are in, and then he's also opening up the format to the questions and answers of the individual people. And it's very valid because, first of all, he is demonstrating that he's super keen to learn more about the local culture, and that he's also taking the topics back to the boardroom.
Yeah.
And that's then convincing. And sure, we only have started rolling this out by 2023, so there's a long way to go. We just have to stick to these formats, and we have to just continue, you know. And even if you have devil's advocates which criticize everything, that's okay. For the time being, it's totally okay.
Yeah.
And let's work from there.
And I think that's a perfect bridge to leadership and the role of leaders in creating and promoting corporate culture. You were mentioning also that you have been dealing with new leadership formats, also leadership framework. Could you elaborate a little on that? From your perspective, what role do leaders play in the entire topic?
I have to say that there was always leadership principles, Körber, with the pandemic in 2022. And when you have seen that the pandemic was going on and on forever, kind of, you have seen that leaders have to be enabled to also lead remote. So trust and collaboration also at that point in time was maybe in our heads and hearts, but not so much maybe in the focus, right? And that's why we have started in a small team of HR people, firstly, to work on also radical new ways of thinking leadership. And one of our leadership principles is we demonstrate trust, by the way. And this was very crucial for the pandemic period, because not seeing your people, not seeing maybe customers for a long time, not being able to have tangible results at your desk, not being able to also ask people in, this is something which has to be kind of educated also within a leadership group. And that was one of the things we've been doing. And a couple of others were like, we achieve results. We achieve results even though we are working remote, right? Okay. So that trust component, but also how can you detect as a leader if someone is really contributing or not? And so we have been working on that, and we've very shortly seen the success of these leadership principles. And then that was really radical. We throw all our management trainings away in that very year. So we started also from scratch with building up our new leadership trainings, which are now camps. We went into the journey format, from classroom trainings to journey formats, and we have even alumni rounds. And then we also worked on our diagnostics so that we only promote and employ people which kind of build on our leadership principles, so that we are sure that our idea of culture will be lived and continued.
That totally resonates and reflects also my view on leadership. I think in the time that we are operating right now, everything's changing fast and a lot of uncertainty. I think a clear framework is key, and this framework, of course, needs to have the principles and the commitment for leadership at its core. But then we need to make sure that those principles are anchored again in all the processes, in all the daily life, because otherwise it's not sustainable. And I heard that also from what you were saying, to rather streamline leadership and not making it broad, like a broad offer. Everybody can work on whatever he or she feels like, but rather link it to strategy but make it more coherently and consistently. And I think that's also very important. And then it's like kind of the foundation. Pay more attention and closer attention to actually identifying and onboarding leaders in their people leadership, and also reflecting core values and principles. And I think that's a clear framework then gives also orientation to both the leaders but also the people that are being led. So that's really
true. Yeah,
that's really relevant.
That's relevant, yes. And we very often start at Körber, at least because, you know, it's a technology company coming from engineering. People know from their DNA that experimenting is key to improve and to improve fast. And so also within HR, when we do something, we go public very early, at a very early stage, and work from there. So it's iterating. And to me, this was very beneficial because we learned so much in that iteration before we had the finished product, like the leadership camp or base camp or our coaching pool or other topics like our respectful workplace training. We have been disclosing our projects really quickly and then have been collecting feedbacks and even criticism in order to improve from there. And this is what I like about our culture, which was there. We have not built on that, right? We have been just working on how to improve those DNA topics which are solidly implemented, and also showcase, even as HR department, that we are kind of engineers of our North Star, which is maybe 2030, right?
Yeah, and that's really, I think, also helpful for the acceptance, because it's not creating the impression that you're inventing the wheel new, but build on what is there and is at the core. So that's also, I think, driving credibility from the people. But let's get back for a minute to why corporate culture actually matters. And maybe we can also talk about maybe the changing relevance of the topic when we look at labor markets, demographics, and the war for talents, or a stronger labor market. From your perspective, how relevant is corporate culture in attracting and retaining our people? And do you see any changes from years ago? Is corporate culture more relevant now than it has been before?
I think it's the one corporate currency which separates us from other employers. I think it's really like you can see it as a currency, like a trade or a trade-off, that people really consciously choose the culture they want to work for, especially if you have, niche profiles, which we have. We have more than 4,000 job titles, so that you know where we are coming from. Very often very specialized people, which maybe focus on our pharma business area, on rare disease, or people which work on very specific AI use cases. And in order to attract those people, you have to offer them more than just salaries and benefits and plans, right? And that's why, to us, coming from no brand basically in 2020, uniting those more than 40 brands under that brand, we really have to work on the topic. And we made it a business case, because if you read Gallup or McKinsey, a couple of studies, I mean, companies which are so much dependent on innovation as we are, they have a better return if they work on culture. It can be 70% more patents, IP, solutions. Yeah. And also when it comes to, do wanna people leave you?
Exactly.
I mean, the Gallup study really showcases each and every year how many people are so undecided in their head. Yeah. They may go to work, but they are not any longer there. They kind of live a separate life. They are not really into their organization any longer. And that's why we've been starting that. That's why we put so much effort to really come across culture in every single step we have in each and every product we offer as HR team, but also in a lot of other processes around our businesses.
Yeah, I mean, just as you were saying, there are studies showing that people would leave for better corporate culture. Of course, in a market where it's easier to leave, then that is really a risk that they leave because they don't have the culture they expect or want or wish for. So it's really, I think, a stronger point line also in the employer attractiveness. And interestingly, and that's what also our recruiting teams and hiring managers tell us, people ask more for how is your corporate culture like in the interviews. And I find that interesting also from the perspective that we need to be aware that we need to also enable our people and hiring managers in explaining also what is the culture like, how do you experience it, and because they probably didn't have to answer those questions before. So it's also about enabling here and giving them feeling to how do I describe this, what are the formats we have, and how do we measure it. So that's an interesting point. And another one is if you look at those employer ratings, also in the platforms where they can rate you, culture is or has become a more relevant factor than it has before. So that's also something we need, of course, to take into consideration in our journeys here.
And we do a lot of business plays when we do leadership conferences, because I myself like to overdo stuff so that people notice that there's maybe a to-do also in your own leadership life, right? And I know when we introduce the leadership principles, we have been playing for each and every leadership principle 5 a sketch in front of the whole leadership audience. And we have not disclosed this also to our board members. And it was a super nice hero experience for a couple of them. And the second year at the leadership conference, we also told our leaders, hey, each and every one of you has to be a chief culture officer.
Exactly.
That's the most important topic for hiring, but also for retaining people, because very often people tend to focus on new joiners and they neglect, the stable team which is there. And it does not make sense to only focus on one person, bringing the person in and onboard the person when we have a team which is there and also needs the same attention, especially in hybrid worlds. I mean, people which are more or less hybrid have to be also approached, even one-to-one-ish, and you have to make room in your agenda to do these leadership tasks in your week.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, in particular with leaders, but also all our people being cultural ambassadors to the inside and also to the external world, because I think that goes across generation, that people are more focused and oriented towards what others say, how it is and how it feels, than what it's written on the internet or in some platforms. So it's also to have this attitude of actually using them as cultural ambassadors is super crucial to promote it and to again be authentic and more credible to the people inside and outside. So that's
totally right. And we have been having a 71st anniversary of our company. This was in 2021. And we've been thinking, how HR should contribute, and we were searching then for Körber career pioneers. And we've been thinking, okay, let's do one per week maybe, so kind of 50 people, right? Or maybe one per month. And then so many people handed their, let's say, CV for that campaign in. We're still having Culture Pioneers 4 years after. So the series is kind of never stopping. And that's, I think, also very convincing for external people to think about, hey, should I work for Körber? That those internal people, and as you say, out of every generation, every profile, showcase themselves publicly on social media and internally as career pioneers. I mean, I like that so much.
And I like the idea for other topics as well. I mean, like the real corporate culture, but also, for example, for promoting a more digital culture, which is, I think it's just as relevant for you as it is for us. So we have now launched an ERGO GPT multiplier program, following the same idea that we asked people to apply to be part of this program, and now we, of course, first of them enable and teach them how to use the ERGO GPT for their work and get familiar. But then, in order to train others and multiply both the digital mindset, but also, of course, the skills, how to use it for my job. And I was amazed by the number of people applying for it, making it their own, wanting to be part of the program, and now on their journey in getting familiar with ERGO GPT and using it for us for strategic purposes. So I think those, and this reflects obviously the same idea of multiplying certain parts of the culture, and I think it's much stronger than just promoting them with training programs and so on, but getting them to own the topic and multiply it in the organization. I think it's really a lever.
I think you have a high level of trust in your culture, because I've seen that AI, even though we have it in customer product slots, that the internal use of AI was kind of watched critically. And so we've been working on an agreement with our Works Council to define all those major points so that we are quicker in implementing AI also internally. And I've seen that we have to overcome all those discussions on AI, which are broadly outside there in media and on social media, to just also diminish the fear to get into new solutions. So I think that's a great achievement you've been doing.
Yeah, and it makes me proud in particular to see how many applied there. And I launched it and opened it, and there were such a diversity of people from like all hierarchical level, and very curious. So that really made me think about the power of this multiplier or ambassador program. So I think that should and can be used in other topics as well.
It's a great success. Maybe I can come back to you and we can also take it and reuse it maybe for our purposes. That's a cool approach.
Yeah. So looking at your impressive journey that you have at Körber, I'm sure that there have been people being critical about it, because of course some people always and still consider culture as a buzzword and so on. So is there any example you have where you have been confronted with somebody being very critical, and what is your most convincing argument in actually be part of the journey instead of staying out?
Maybe first things, very often we as leaders have to fight against hierarchical discrimination. I'm pretty sure you know what I mean. Yeah. It's not that we discriminate people, which are our co-workers, but very often you do not get to the points out of that people which work each and every day, maybe also elsewhere. And when I was on that culture journey in Porto, that's a big site of ours, we have a digital campus there, we have also operations in the factory there. I was visiting the factory, and it's a different thing if you talk to blue-collar people than to white-collar people on what culture means to them. Very often they have very long tenures with the company. And for them, you know, each and every day is kind of the same. There's maybe new products to come and others which are going. And while I visited the factory, there was one of those foremen. He was there for more than 30 years. And he was also raising a couple of points which have not been pleasant, not only from HR view, but also from a company perspective, right? And then we did a culture podcast on site. We went into a little office, because in factories, you know, you do not have that many offices. And I invited 3 people from the shop floor to do that podcast together with us.
That's great.
And that was a pleasant experience, because I think now everyone, and it was very brave also, right? That they exposed themselves in that scenery, in that setting. But I think in the end, they've been very proud. It has been covered broadly. And I think it's one of the most listened podcasts we have been issuing so far.
That's really amazing. Yeah. I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on forever, but looking at the time, why don't we look at the culture habit cards that I find very amazing? Can we have a look at one of the cards, or even...
We have been implementing these 2 years ago at a leadership conference, because culture change is about habit change, and we started with the individual habits a person can change. And this is the first culture habit card deck, and you are very happy to pick a card.
Okay, I pick the first
one. And then
one.
let's discuss one. I think the first one is the intro. That's where you can download the app as well.
So I'll pick that one. So it says, successful people ask better questions, and as a result, they get better answers. Prioritize active listening in meetings this week. Focus on understanding others' perspective before sharing your own. Consciously reflect on when in a meeting you created an opinion or judgment. Try to stay open-minded without judging or interpreting too fast. And so you pick that, and then you start reflecting by yourself. Is that the exercise? And you go week by week with all the cards, and then you exchange with others, or what is the idea behind?
Actually, I can also share a nice anecdote on that. Maybe you have also encountered those situations. You are in a virtual setting, you have a Teams or Zoom meeting, and there's a quiet wall. Maybe sometimes there's faces, maybe there's only names, there's maybe multiple screens of people, and you do not feel that you can interact. And then I made myself the habit that I do quizzes. So whenever it's calm, I always do quizzes. And I do then random picking, like, hey, Sarah, can you maybe? And then in the chat, people answer those quiz questions. And I was also doing it once because it became such a crucial habit for me to interact with people in an on-site meeting. And it was calm, and I was wondering, wow, on-site, why is it so calm? And then I was again doing a quiz. And later on, a colleague approached me like, hey, we're preparing so much for you that you do not have to do the quiz again. And I was like, wow, but why haven't you said anything? Yeah, because you have been so busy, talking to us that there was no time for us to bring you to listening. And this is such a great remark to me to reflect my behaviors, and that's what I love to do, those exercises.
But great how open he was then. That's really amazing.
And I also want to invite you maybe to pick one of those cards. Do you want to share an example maybe out of your career or your leadership teams?
Yeah, happy to do so. Let's see what it is. Oh, it's about asking for feedback.
Oh, well, important.
Short questions can give helpful feedback and send significant trust-strengthening signals. And looking at the card and the ask for feedback, immediately one experience from my one of my former leadership roles comes to my mind, and that was about a situation where I was very super busy, involved in a big project, and one of my teammates at some point approached me. And he was somehow not sure whether he could openly talk. And then I asked, so there's something on your heart, so share it with me. So I asked for feedback, and then he very openly said that I wasn't with the team enough and not present for the team. So he really gave me the feedback that the team needs me more than I thought it did. And that was really one of those once in a lifetime situations that really changed something, because of course I reflected on that, and nowadays I always try to be more present the busier we get. So that really about asking for feedback and getting open feedback.
That's also a very good story. I liked it a lot. I mean, it's one of our leadership principles, that perspective of enabling and empowering people. Sometimes if we think people are already empowered, I think we do not ask back if they really are or feel like they are.
That's true.
We want them to speak up, but sometimes they don't feel as secure maybe with a topic or a project. And I think that's also a very good card to play around with own habits.
Perfect. So the two of us can continue to play, but I think we should stop our conversation now. Thank you once again for being my guest today. It was really inspiring conversation, inspired by your own personal experience, but also by the journey you've started at Körber. There are a lot of things that I will take with me and be inspired. And I'm very much looking forward to our continuous exchange of ideas. So thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.